Hello and welcome to the WorkWise for Screen podcast, created to help our screen industries better look after all the people their businesses depend on.
And stay on safe legal ground. It's part of a growing collection of practical resources and guidance that you can dip into without it taking you forever or costing you anything. It's supported by the BFI, awarding national lottery funding.
We'll be talking with people across production, distribution and exhibition, animation, VFX and gaming about the challenges to well-being we face when deadlines and budgets are tight, and how, most importantly, to improve things. We are your hosts, Tasita Small from the Small HR Company, the HR for Entertainment one,
and Keith Arrowsmith, the legal one, a creative industries solicitor and programme director for WorkWise for Screen. Tasita, in this episode, I'd like to tackle skills and careers development, especially when we're talking about small businesses and how we can provide training and support for a very kind of disparate set of people who come and go as the projects come and go. Is that something that you've had to think about?
Yeah, definitely. Lots and lots. You've got a challenge here where you have lovely creative businesses that shrink and grow or stay small because that's the nature of the work. And then the people that are working on those projects or within those businesses have a combination of worker statuses. They're either employees, which you kind of think of in a traditional sense, or freelancers or consultants that come in and out. And what I find is that there's always the question from the owners of these businesses around, well, how do I develop my team? I get that question often, and it's great that we've got Perri here to talk about that today.
Yeah, Perri comes to us from Mastered, and there's a lovely little quote on the website that I found, which I thought was a really nice starting point for us. The world is magnificent in its diversity and industry needs new voices, creators and storytellers, which is why we work hard to open doors to those that need support. And I think there's something really interesting about how do we develop not just the current cohort, but also that new set of people who are kind of knocking on the door. So Perri, thanks ever so much for joining us.
Delighted to be here. What a great subject to be talking about.
What got you into this?
As with many people's careers, I think, in the creative industries, it's incredibly non-linear. So I never set out to do exactly what I'm doing now. I actually set out to be a journalist, and I was an editor in newspapers, in magazines, and then I worked in some publishing and wrote a book and then found myself, as many people do, in a place of working with my co-founder, Adil and Grace. We were all of the creative industries. And one thing that we were all very fortunate to have is that we had all had mentors in some way. Someone had been there to go, this is how you navigate this bit. And Mastered was like kind of established because we thought it would be much better if it was more systematic than just you got lucky because you had a mentor, a manager, a friend, a family member who happened to give you some guidance on the way.
What's a mentor and how does that fit into this idea of finding skills and development?
So we've been supporting creative professionals for just over a decade now. And what that definition of a mentor is has changed throughout that time. So we go on quite a long journey with this. At the moment, I guess our current definition that we would use of a mentor is actually someone who is kind of part trainer, part mentor, part coach. And so we bucket quite a lot of those different hats under one person because they are both imparting knowledge, they're giving feedback on work and skills, they're at the same time thinking about what's the attitude and mindset of this person that's coming in, and are there any shifts need to be made there? And so it's a lot of different skills for one person. A mentor can be many things and can have many different names.
There are definitely differences, but I like the idea of a mentor being someone that's quite accessible to everybody. Sometimes I feel like having a coach can be for people who are maybe in senior roles or leadership roles, whereas having a mentor or being a mentor, you can do it at any stage and have at any stage of your career.
So I'm just thinking, did I have a mentor? Did I have a coach? Again, I don't think they're words that were very much used 20, 30 years ago. And I went through a training contract. So there was a kind of formal process where someone was in charge of my formal training. But I think lots of the softer skills, you kind of expected to pick up on the way somehow. So Perri, how do you give it a little bit more rigour, a little bit more of a framework, rather than just hoping that you pick it up on the way?
When you work with people, so many people focus on, oh, do they have the technical skills? But actually, when you ask why you've hired someone or why they've stayed or why you promoted someone, it often is because of those, what we would call, say, soft skills. We try and think about like the whole person. We're a training organisation, we do skills boot camps, and sometimes they are skills boot camps on technical skills. So it's very specifically, we are learning procedural generation in art pipelines or something. Or we're doing over here, we're doing business skills for self-employed. We approach everything as like a whole person. And so, yes, you might be teaching someone about procedural generation, but actually you're not just, it is our responsibility not just to think about that particular one skill, is actually to think about all of those other things and tackle the whole person. We take that on as our responsibility to think about that. So any program that we're going on, those mentors who are leading that through, they're not just thinking, oh, am I making sure that someone knows X, Y, and Z? They're also thinking about, oh, well, when that person asked me a question, how did they ask that to me? And if they challenged someone else in the group, did they challenge that in a way that was actually really cooperative rather than conflict driven? And how might I bring about some of these things? So we don't divorce technical skills and soft skills. We think about them as a whole, because I think that's often a way that you can support people in knowing how that actually lives in their real life world.
I often say that soft skills need to rebrand because soft skills are the hardest to learn. They're definitely the ones that take the hardest and the most practice to get right. With the business that you work with, what are you seeing the demand for most at the moment?
So I can answer that question today, but also what this would have been 3 months ago and where it is going to be 3 months' time will be completely different. And I think that's the thing that we are like properly deeply learning more than anything else, is that the conversation about skills is changing so often. The half-life of a skill is now like 2 years, 6 months. And so at the moment, there's a few things that we're seeing. We're trying to look at the whole picture of all the different people involved in this and what they might need. And so a couple of kind of headlines would be, for those people who are self-employed, it's those kind of commercial skills of really understanding what they provide, the market in which they provide it in, what makes them special, what makes them unique, and how do you place and position that in a kind of a wider marketplace. What are you pricing? How are you charging people? And that's because you've got all these incredible crafts people who are crafts in terms of maybe making films or literally making physical objects. And their commercial head was not how they got into this. It was their passion it was something else that motivated them. So on the self-employed front, it's those commercial skills that are coming up time and time again. On a wider front, we have a lot of requests for leadership and management skills, inevitably. And this is all the way from junior first role as a manager, all the way through up to kind of C-suite, thinking about the kind of direction of the business. We're in interesting times, aren't we? The times, they are a-changing. And the only thing that we can be assured of is that they will change and change. So organisations are looking for leads who are able to balance commercial creativity, changing business pressures, and look after their teams while doing so. Like, that's a challenging role. And then again, without trying to put too much into kind of technical side of things, but just get really, really niche into the different subsectors. So what an animation studio would be looking for versus an indie game studio versus a large kind of VFX post house or something. Lots and lots of different things, again, depending on what departments you're talking to. So no major like themes there, more just the theme is that everyone is so specific in this particular thing that we need here to push this project forward or to push this organisation forward.
I think the challenge that I see is around the fact that sometimes terms that are used to support skills and career development are labelled as corporate, and corporate is the opposite of creative in some people's minds. And we're not talking about trying to make creatives corporate. We're trying to give them frameworks to do the best work that they can do when they want to do it. And so I'd love to learn a little bit more from you about how you overcome challenges or what businesses are asking you for to help them overcome those challenges where people are thinking, well, actually, a personal development plan, an appraisal, what you're talking about, that's not what we do. I'm here to make a film and I'm going to go on to my next job.
So I think the way that we work and the way that we kind of, people commission boot camps or programs from us is we're trying to understand what problem you're trying to solve. And so sometimes you go into an organisation and they're like, very specifically, we have grown to this size. And so we have a number of producers who need to be able to do X, Y, and Z because the projects are bigger, for example. and they have real clarity on what their organization needs. And that's wonderful, because you can then work with them to go, right, well, this is where you are in A, we're trying to get you to B, let's look at that. I would say 90% of conversations that we have don't start there, though.
Okay.
Actually, most of the work that we end up doing is trying to understand and trying to help them understand what is the problem that they're trying to solve. And that's because, again, we're an industry of SMEs. We are not used to necessarily having annual goals that are broken down by 6 monthly, like it's project by project. And I think you can still have that kind of operating system in those projects, but it isn't factored in the same way. And so that's a real challenge.
It's a challenge, and it's a shame that you have a 9-month project or a 6-month project that sometimes isn't built in at the beginning as an objective. With such large teams, even smaller teams, so much can be achieved by logging what you're doing, because you're often doing it but not formalizing it sometimes.
And that sense of alignment that you need to bring people together to go, well, we're all running in the same direction. So that's kind of one piece of the puzzle to try and think about is, what are you trying to achieve with training, and how can we help you get there? And I think once we have hopefully collaborated and understood, right, this is the thing that you are trying to do, then it's about just, it feels so basic and obvious to say, but it's like being user first. Who are the people in the room in front of you? If we have got a load of mid-level C++ programmers who are trying to learn advanced maths, who is going to be teaching them? What are the types of ways they're going to be teaching them? People don't want to have training done to them. They want someone who is better than them at the thing they want to learn and help navigate them and take them on that journey. They don't always want to be told what to do, actually. I think most of the times, because we're predominantly dealing with mid-level professionals, there's not a parent-child relationship. They want a kind of mentor-mentee. They want an adult-to-adult conversation. And so they want to have someone who understands them and who's been in the trenches with them and who knows that, yes, in theory, this should happen, but in reality, this is what's going to happen. And so I think being user-first and understanding that it really matters who the person is. It really matters when it happens. If you start something at the wrong point of production, you might as well never have started it. So having something that is appreciative of the milestones around us and can bend and ebb and flex with that is really critical. Yeah. And I think finally, you have to make sure that those things are connected to the day-to-day work. If you don't understand what the context of that is, then you can't help the person in front of you go, well, you're learning this because, the project that we're doing here, that's going to enable you to do X, Y, and Z. But if you don't do that, you don't get those outcomes that you want to get at the end of it.
So coming at it from the other end, when you've got businesses saying, we haven't got time to train people up, we haven't got the budget to do it, we've got a deadline to get this project out of the door, how do you persuade them to make it part of that every day?
So first one about time, I think if people haven't got time, then they're probably identifying the wrong problem because it's not important enough to actually be solved. So if you genuinely don't have time for it, it's because learning the thing will not advance you in some way enough in order to take you off the production schedule. So that's one of the reasons why. I mean, another reason is more just that a producer maybe doesn't have the context of the organization's goals. And so, of course, I'm not going to take my artists off this schedule. However, if they knew and they were empowered to know that what we want to achieve in the next 2 years is X, Y, and Z, then maybe we would be able to take them off the production schedule. And then I think budget goes back to the wonderful, brilliant nature of our industries is that they are informal and we don't have necessarily learning, but we don't always have a budget line for training. And that's where people have to get really savvy about what is available. If they're not, you should put a budget line for it. It's really important. And also understand where some wonderful other funding might be available. And so, part of my job has become helping people understand this particular pot of funding that we use and allow employers to kind of tap into skills boot camps. But again, if you're a small business, it's a lot to know how to do. There's so many different jobs and so many hats that you have to wear, isn't it? Being a leader in a business like this.
I think there's a lot to know, but also sort of trusting the systems because applying for funding takes time. And if you know that you've got to do a load of reporting on the back of getting the funding, it starts becoming a burden. So is that about just surrounding yourself with people who know the system and have experience of the system and can help you understand where the benefits might lie?
I would say so. I mean, as all of us small business owners, like delegating where you can to someone. So again, when studios come to us, For us, it's about saying, well, this is what's available to you and this is how it works. The wonderful thing specifically about Skills Bootcamp funding is that there is none of that red tape for an organisation, because what you want to do is you want to make sure that the organisation that you're working with is responsible for that red tape. And typically it's our job to know what's available. Typically, if we can't help, then we know someone who can, who will have a different type of funding in a different type of area, and we can point you in that direction.
So given that time is always going to be short and money is always going to be short, do you have some tips on how you prioritise? How do you make sure that you're using those valuable resources in the best possible way?
Just understanding what you're trying to achieve. So whether that's in the course of the next 6 months, the next year, like genuinely really knowing where you are and where your people are. Now, again, imagine most of us are in small organisations where you might have 15, 20 different job roles. You cannot possibly understand what every single one of those people need. Even in large organisations, having that person who is responsible for tracking and measuring the capabilities, they can do it. And the reality is this year and next year and beyond is that they will get out of date time and time and time again. And so actually, I think it's actually creating a culture where the individuals in your organisation are working together with you to help understand what they need. And you're giving them power and permission to go, right, well, I know that in my particular role here, I need to be able to do X, Y, and Z because I'm connected to that world. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring that back and talk to you about what I need. And so there being a kind of collaborative approach to going, right, well, it's not a top down, the organisation needs this. It's a, let's collaborate to go, you're all subject matter experts. You all know what you need broadly because you're in the Discord channels, you're getting the newsletters, you're listening to this on YouTube, you know that. So actually it's coming together and working out what that kind of plan needs to be. And if you can do those two things, you've got a much better chance.
And if we're looking at that kind of bespoke approach to training, does geography matter? Would it be the same approach if I happened to be in the Northwest as in the Southwest?
That's a great question. And it's really only been in the last 3 to 4 years that I've really started to understand the funding available from different local authorities. And one thing to point out is that with the new Labour government and with devolution, much and almost all of the education budget is now being devolved to either the mayoral combined authorities, so there's big, larger mayor units, or just local authorities, because there is this wonderful belief, which is true, which is that different regions in the UK have very different skill needs and they should have the autonomy to decide what they do and how they do it. And that's really important because depending on where your organisation is based and where your team are based will depend on what funding is available to you. There are some things that are available everywhere and there are some things that are very localised. So I think West Yorkshire is a great example. We work with them and like I would say 80% of regions in the UK, they have access to Skills Bootcamp funding. So if you're a business based in the creative industries in West Yorkshire, you can get bespoke funding through Skills Bootcamps through us. But also they have some amazing, very specific hyper-local funding that Tracy Brabin, the mayor, has identified and put budget towards because they are trying to become an even larger production hub. And so if you understand that kind of local economic development plan, which sounds like very big words there, but actually if you have an understanding of what your local area is trying to achieve, it can massively accelerate it. Liverpool is another great example. There's lots going on up there, but really specifically in the last few months, there's been a massive music project that has been announced, which means that if you're a business working in music, you will be able to access a particular types of funding that maybe if you're based down in Brighton, you wouldn't be able to access. So knowing who you are in your local area is really, really important to be able to know what the wider local economy are trying to achieve and what your place might be in that and how you might access funding.
So from a business perspective, the other barrier I can see is that I might feel that spending time and money and energy training up some of those freelancers might feel like a complete waste of time because we'll never see them again. So where's the value in embedding training into a business where we've got that disparate workforce?
I mean, I would say that the Skills Bootcamp funding, for example, if you're self-employed, you don't pay anything for it. So actually what employers can do is signpost people to that particular bucket funding and can go, we will not be charged for that bit of funding. You can go and take that. If you're an employer, then you have to pay either a 10 or 30% contribution to that training. But it's knowing about things like that where you can put your freelance community in the direction of things, because those, again, maybe local authorities want to support those individual freelancers. Funding available specifically for those who are self-employed and pointing them to that is probably the best thing.
I really believe in that paying it forward piece. It sounds like you're saying like that investment right now is for the good of what you're doing, but also for the good of the industry. And that mindset would definitely help.
And why wouldn't you, if that's going to improve the reputation of your business, create those exciting connections across the sector? The next generation of freelancers are going to be knocking on your door, wanting to work with you because you've got this track record of providing that extra level of support and care for your team. So if I thought that I'd got some time to give back to the sector, how do you find mentors? How do you find these coaches? You know, if people were really interested in starting those kind of conversations up, where would you go?
I mean, for us, that's the hardest job that we have, is finding the right people to teach, train, lead our programs. Like, that is basically one of the hardest jobs, because you've got to get this kind of right mix of someone who is experienced enough, but who doesn't want to be doing that full time. How do they do it? They can literally just come and speak to me. But very specifically, I tend to find there is a type of person who is, it's related to life stage often, that they've got to a certain part. They want a kind of portfolio career. They want to perhaps build something on their own and also give back a bit and also keep their hand in the pot of it. And so they maybe have 2 or 3 roles. And that's the type of person I think works really, really well. It's often because they've either had a young family and have realised they want that level of flexibility, or they have some caring commitments elsewhere, which means that kind of strict 9 to 5 or 8 to 10 or whatever that is not possible for them. And they're yearning for that. So there's a type of person who we find comes to us and says, I'd like to be a trainer, a mentor, a coach on one of your programs. And where we get that particularly right, it's wonderful because you can help pass them on to others.
I think they're special people because they've got to have that depth of knowledge, but they've also got to be able to reach out and connect to people at the right level. And it's almost kind of a translator's job as well.
So there's a great example of someone who was a student and who is now a mentor on our programs. A guy called Paul from the VFX world. He was learning Unreal with us because he wanted to broaden out his understanding of real time. Fast forward to 2 years later, he's actually a mentor on one of our programs for some of our employer partners, because he's been doing such interesting work in how AI is being used in that VFX pipeline, that he is now able to mentor one of the companies that work with us on how the art team are using AI, because they just they don't have those base level skills. And that's just a really great example of, I think, about how anyone can be a mentor, despite you might actually only have 5 to 10 years experience. You don't have to have 20, 30, 40 years experience, and how those experts and pockets can come from anywhere, and why that kind of non-parent child or non-teacher student relationship is so important in adult learning. You can learn from anyone who has been there and done that before you.
I really like that. We can learn from anybody. And I think knowing that and saying that out loud from yourself, Perri, is really great, because there'll be people who'll be listening to this be thinking, oh, I've got something to share. I never thought of being a mentor. I always thought I only fell into the mentee category.
There are just so many great organisations who are doing that. And I want to shout out Limit Break Mentoring and Games. So one thing I love about Limit Break is that they have people from all different levels who are mentoring all different levels of people. Again, we've had some of our mentors who are Limit Break mentors, and we've also had some of our students who are Limit Break mentors, because again, in this world of adults and career development, we all have something to learn. We all have something to give back, and we can all take on those different roles at different points in our career.
It sounds as though we're operating at a time where there is support, but you need to know where to access it and how to make the best use of the resources that you've got available to it. But it does sound like it's positive. It doesn't sound as though necessarily it's going to be just one barrier after another. So Perri, thanks ever so much for starting us on this conversation about skills. I'm sure there's going to be loads and loads of resources that we can help people access through the platform at WorkWise for Screen. But for today, thanks ever so much.
Thank you so much, Perri.
Thanks for listening to the WorkWise for Screen podcast, supported by the BFI awarding National Lottery funding.
Our online platform provides lots of easy to understand information and invites to our events. Visit our website at workwiseforscreen.org.uk and register for the latest updates.
Please follow us on social media and join in this crucial conversation.
And contact us with suggestions for future episodes, or if you can support the programme in any other way. This podcast is produced by Podcast Labs. Music is by Benjamin Squires.